Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how are you?
I'm dandy. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Are you?
Thank you very much. I am. It's all hunky-dory here in Spring Lake, Missouri.
Yes, the weather is beautiful, so I'll take it.
It is.
It's actually a little chilly, a little crisp in the air. I love it. Love it. So you got a case for us today or what?
I do have a case, and it's actually a request from our good friend, E.J. Hammond.
Hi, E.J. Hammond.
She said, I think you guys would do great with this case. And I said, thank you so much, EJ. And we're doing it right now. And I also want to plug EJ. EJ wrote a couple episodes for us a while back. And she is the end-all, be-all, in my opinion, a fountain of knowledge, if you will, of Ted Bundy.
Oh.
So much so that she even co-wrote a book. And the book is called Ted Bundy, Memories of the Beast. And you can find it on Amazon. I suggest everybody go get it and read it. Like, she knows little minute details of Bundy that you might not have ever known before. So, yeah.
I hear
Totally go get it. She's a doll. You guys would love it. Anyway, you want to start this?
I am ready. Let's go.
All right. I do want to also say that this does have a content warning of sexual assault and rape. So if that is something that upsets you, might be a good episode to skip and wait till next week, or go back and listen to our past episodes. Bloomington-Normal is a metro area of about 130,000 people in north central Illinois. It's located just 2 hours southwest of Chicago. Blo-No, as it's affectionately called, which I find is very funny, is one of those cities in America that's known for being, well, normal. I mean, it's flat and there's not much to see, and cornfields surround it. And
good old Midwest town, right?
Midwest town, right. And one local real estate agent describes Bloomington-Normal as the town that, quote, has everything that you need and nothing that you don't. So located in McLean County, Bloomington-Normal was founded on land originally occupied by the Kinkapoo people. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln gave a speech to a crowd of almost 7,000. Now it's home to State Farm Insurance and the Beer Nuts Company. In addition to being the home of the largest Dairy Queen restaurant and the place where the first Steak and Shake restaurant opened in 1934, the city offers a lot of good breweries and local food spots. Besides good food, the town's highlights are the world's largest 4-H fair and the Summer Shakespeare Festival. And one of the city's most colorful things is the annual Zombie Walk, which would be a blast to go. I just like stuff like that.
No, I think that'd be kind
of creepy.
Yeah, very cool.
Bloomington-Normal is a town where people feel safe, as those giant cornfields are some sort of buffer between the townfolk and the real world. So then it was quite disconcerting when on the 4th of April in 2003, 25-year-old Christy, who was sound asleep in her home in Bloomington-Normal, was suddenly and terrifyingly woken in the middle of the night by an intruder.
Oof.
Quote, I was in shock, absolute shock, she said in an article on abcnews.go.com. And I think it was an interview for 2020 or Primetime Crime, but I can't find the show available anywhere. And believe me, I scrubbed the internet looking for it. But she goes, quote, I looked at the door and saw the light there, and something just didn't seem right. And that's when I saw him. And the next thing I remember is that he was on top of me in bed. Chrissy said the intruder told her that he was only there to burglarize the place and that he didn't want to hurt her. but if she made a noise, he would shoot her. Paralyzed with fear, Christie's only thought was that she was about to be killed just a few weeks shy of her 26th birthday. She recounted later how the man wore a ski mask and gloves, and he seemed oddly calm and methodical as he bound her with zip ties and duct tape. After he raped her whole head with the tape, he slipped one of her pillowcases over her head and sexually assaulted her for 45 minutes.
Ugh.
He was assertive and didn't appear to be nervous at all. Christie said, quote, he seemed like he knew what he was doing. When the sexual assault was over, the man forced Christie into the bathtub where she was ordered to scrub herself clean. Still taped up, Christie began to panic. The fact the rapist forced her to get into the bathtub made her think that he was about to kill her. And shaking and trembling, Christie tried to focus on scrubbing everything away. Meanwhile, the intruder went about gathering up all the bedding and other evidence, and then he left. It took a while before Christie got the nerve to remove the duct tape, with chunks of her hair just coming out where the tape was, but she didn't care. She then scrambled to the phone and called for help. The only description she could really tell the police was his approximate height and weight, and that he had piercing blue eyes. Just 4 months earlier, in December of 2002, however, another sexual assault had happened, and the police noticed that the details of the case were terrifyingly similar to the details of Christie's case. The woman, only known as A.M., woke up at 4:30 in the morning with a flashlight shining on her and a man standing in her bedroom doorway. The intruder put a knife to her head and said that he would cut her throat if she didn't comply. During the assault, the intruder told her that he had been watching her from across the street and he had planned to do the exact same thing to her roommate. It was unusual for Bloomington-Normal to have one occurrence of rape at all, let alone two, and something was horribly wrong. The police had the sickening suspicion that the town had its very first ever serial rapist. Police realized by his victim's description that they were dealing with a sophisticated criminal. His victims described how he was totally confident and never faltered or seemed in a hurry the whole time he carried out his assault. The manner in which he pulled things from his belt was executed as if he had done this before, or at least had a history of restraining others. His gloves were similar to those worn by EMTs or other public safety personnel. The police felt certain that the rapist would have no criminal record, and the FBI told them that they would be looking for a, quote, your run-of-the-mill nice guy. In other words, the police were looking for a model citizen with a sinister, dark soul. The rapist would strike a third time in January of 2005, and it was the same thing. The woman, known as A.L., woke up to a masked man standing over her bed. The man put a cord around her neck and showed her his knife, and he told her that he had been watching her for a while and that he had been close to catching him trying to break into her apartment several times. And he wasn't lying. Per court documents, in July of 2004, a man walked into this woman's place wearing all black between 11 and 2 a.m., and that's when she screamed for help and he ran. Months later, she, quote, woke up to find someone on the steps leading up to her apartment, which were right in front of the window where she slept. And she looked out the door and yelled at the person, but she could only see the person's feet. And then the guy went away. Then a few nights later, on the night of January 26, 2005, his fourth victim, 28-year-old restaurant manager Sarah, was awakened by someone coming into her room in the middle of the night. And she was just 6 weeks away from her wedding day. The intruder put a gun to her head and a knife to her throat. And Sarah said that the intruder made it clear that he had been stalking her for a while. And he knew everything about Sarah. He knew what gym she went to. He even knew what her fiancé's car looked like. He knew what her sister looked like. Everything. I mean, he just knew so much about her. A few months earlier, there had been an attempted break-in at her home. And at the time, Sarah had just brushed it off and really didn't take it seriously. Now, with dawning clarity, she realized that the person who tried to break in months earlier was probably the man with the ski mask standing over her and ordering her to perform sexual acts. In the court documents, 2 of the women remained anonymous, and the other 2 wanted their names put out so they could get other people to come forward. I'll just say that right now. That's why some have names and some don't.
That makes sense.
And I've totally left the last names out because they deserve their privacy now.
Yes, they do.
Sarah described the assault as being, quote, humiliating and demeaning and terrorizing. I can only imagine. She felt that the whole ordeal wasn't just an act of sexual gratification on the part of the rapist, but it was meant to devastate her completely. And once again, per court documents, quote, he put a folding knife to her throat and he asked her, 1, for her name, 2, or he asked her who lived at this address, right? And she told him that her parents lived at that address. And he said, quote, I know that. You didn't think I knew that? You make one more noise, you scream, I will put a bullet in your effing head and go to your parents and finish off every single last one of them.
Ugh.
As with the other 3 sexual assaults, he forced Sarah into the bathroom to scrub away all evidence of him. She sat shivering in the tub, waiting for him to leave. And it took him hours before he'd gather up the bedding and other evidence and fled her home just before sunrise. And while she sat there in the tub, all she could think of was that she had to survive. She didn't want anyone to have to call her parents, siblings, or fiancé to tell them that she had been murdered just 6 weeks before her marriage. As her attacker left the scene, Sarah almost didn't report the accident, but she realized that if she didn't file a police report, the person who did this to her was going to rape yet another person. So she called 911, and through her tears and her shaking, Sarah told the police the details that she'd memorized of her attacker. Everything from his gait, which she described as sort of cumbersome, to those haunting blue eyes. She would never be able to forget those eyes, and she was positive that she'd be able to recognize them if she ever saw them again. Sarah told reporters, quote, when you're staring into those eyes, that's the only thing you can see and the only thing you can focus on. They stick with you.
I hope that's how they get them.
Detective Clay Miller was particularly worried about a serial rapist being on the loose. While the assailant didn't seem to strike on a particular schedule or any specific pattern, what Detective Miller was seeing chilled him to his core. The veteran detective said that in his career as a law enforcement officer, he'd seen more brutal and violent attacks, but that some of the things that this rapist would say and do to these women of Bloomington-Normal were nothing short of disgusting and spine-chilling. The victims all said that the rapist would engage them in conversation before the act of violence, and he talked almost lovingly to them,
creepy,
as if he was their boyfriend, and then he just turned and became angry and violent. Detective Miller and his partner realized that this was a special kind of rapist. He was, in fact, a stalker, a man seemingly obsessed with his victims who gathered intimate details about them. He stalked his victims for months before engaging in the assault, and he appeared to leave little to no forensic evidence behind. There were no hair samples, no DNA, no fingerprints, nothing. In April of 2006, a woman by the name of Jonelle lived in fear because her home had become her prison. She had felt like she was being stalked by someone, but she couldn't prove it. And she started to get many phone calls at work that would be hang-ups, right? Like she'd answer it and there'd be nobody there, or they'd hang up. And she noticed a suspicious man with a buzz cut one day followed her home from work. And then a few nights later, her then boyfriend woke her up and told her to call the police because there was a man in the backyard. And her boyfriend went outside with a baseball bat, and after some yelling, this man ran away. And of course, she filed a police report stating her concerns, and the sergeant on duty took a report and assured her that they'd investigate. And then late one night, a few months later, in June, there was an urgent knock at her door. And she looked out, and she didn't see anybody. There was no one there. But her dog was going crazy with barking and just, when somebody comes around and your dog's protecting you, the dog was going nuts. So she knew there was something or somebody outside her home. And she opened up the door. And again, she didn't see anyone. No one. Nobody was out there.
I would not be opening my door.
No, I wouldn't either. She's a brave girl. She thought, okay, maybe it was just some kids playing a prank, but her gut told her to call the police. And so the police came at 1 a.m. A Bloomington police officer by the name of Dave Zemer arrived at Janelle's residence, and he found a man standing against the house as if he was just trying to make himself blend into the siding, just standing there. That's when the intruder, or that man, just after Zemer saw him, the man that was standing there just kind of turned and calmly started to walk away between the two houses in the glare of the officer's flashlight. And Zemer called out for the man to stop and turn around, but the man kept walking. Finally, Zemer called out again, and this time the man stopped.
Oh.
But it appeared as though he was shoving something down the front of his pants. And finally, the man put his hands up and turned around. And at first, Officer Zemer's relaxed. He's like, oh, that's just the sergeant. And then he thought, wait a minute, what's the sergeant doing here?
What?
Police sergeant. So back in 1987, Ricky Lee Beneke fell in love with Jeff Pelo because he had a great smile and the bluest eyes she's ever seen. She stated, quote, actually, the first thing that I fell in love with were his eyes. His eyes were just beautiful, and I could just lose myself in them. By the way, this quote is from the TV show, Who the Bleep Did I Marry?
Which is a classic.
The couple waited for Jeff to get out of the Navy and then tied the knot in January of 1989 in a small country church ceremony. It wasn't long before the couple was expecting the first of 3 children. And so, knowing he needed a job to support his new family, Jeff joined the local police department. And even though the couple would have 3 kids in just 6 years, Jeff and Ricky Lee worked diligently to keep their marriage romantic by having wonderful date nights for just the 2 of them. Ricky Lee, when she spoke, she adored him. And also the kids adored their father and loved having their daddy time. He coached his daughter's softball team and attended all their sporting events, and Jeff was just a loving, devoted family man. In 2000, Jeff was promoted to sergeant, and he won the Policeman of the Year award. And his wife and kids couldn't have been any prouder of him. However, around 2002, Ricky Lee noticed a change in her husband. He started working extra hours and was gone all the time.
At night,
too.
At
night. At night, he said he couldn't sleep, and he would go out to take a walk around the neighborhood in the dark.
Oh, boy.
And it was around this time that they began arguing, and Ricky Lee, who was hearing impaired, said that Jeff would make fun of her over that. Like, he would make fun of her being hearing impaired, and he knew it. I mean, it wasn't like it just happened. All her life, she had she was almost deaf, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he made fun of her, which, yeah, F her.
Wow.
In addition, she felt that he was just in general more ill-tempered. So Ricky Lee began to think what many people think in her situation would think. You know, her husband was having an affair.
Mm-hmm.
So she confronted him, and Jeff Pelo denied that he was having any affair and that he couldn't believe that she would accuse him of that. Jeff claimed it was just the job, and she said that she felt that the job was more important than her, really.
Mm-hmm.
But the 2 finally worked it out. Jeff agreed to change shifts and work fewer hours. And in his future, though, Jeff thought maybe getting another promotion would bring a much-needed pay raise, and he wouldn't have to work so many hours. So on June 10th, 2006, Jeff took an exam for a new promotion while Ricky Lee took the kids to the movies. When Ricky Lee came home, her world turned upside down. From the street, she was confronted with the sight of police cars parked in the driveway. She told her kids to stay in the car, and Ricky Lee jumped from her vehicle and walked straight up to the assistant chief of police. And her heart, of course, was hammering with fear because she was thinking that if the assistant chief of police was at her house, her husband, Jeff, probably was killed in the line of duty. He was probably dead. But the assistant chief said, quote, I know what you're thinking, but Jeff's all right. And then she thought, what on earth are these policemen doing at her house, right? Why would they be there? And Ricky Lee listened in disbelief and horror as the assistant chief explained to her that Jeff had been arrested and that they had a warrant to search her house.
Mm.
And she's like, this has got to be a joke, right? I mean, it had to be a joke. Jeff was Policeman of the Year, right?
Wow.
But
I don't even, wow.
Blindsided, not side-blinded.
Side-blinded. Yep,
They was
side-blinded.
Mm-hmm. But the cops took clothing, computers, and all sorts of items from the house. And then word soon spread that the former Policeman of the Year had been arrested on suspicion of being the Bloomington-Normal serial rapist.
Wow.
devastating news. I could only imagine how.
Well, all the feels. Embarrassed. How did you not see it? Angry.
You're married to Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
I mean, you were totally bamboozled by this man that you utterly adored. The father of your children.
Yeah.
Right?
Oof.
I can't imagine. In his interrogation, which can be viewed in its entirety on the internet, Sergeant Jeff Pelo swore he did nothing wrong, and that the reason he was caught outside Janelle's home at 1 a.m. was because he was trying to find a house to buy for his mother-in-law.
Oh.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's when you go,
Oh, yeah.
That's when you go buy a house. But weird thing is, there are no houses for sale on that street at all. Right?
What do you know? What do you know?
When asked to reconsider his story because, it was unbelievable, Pelo replied, quote, "I am thinking about what I'm telling you. The truth. I don't lead a sinister life of some kind. It wasn't me."
Oh, I think you do, buddy. I think you do. I think your pants are on fire.
As he nervously rubbed his forehead, Jeff swore he was not stalking Janelle. He swore he wasn't doing anything inappropriate. He maintained his innocence throughout the whole thing, claiming that when Officer Zeman approached him, he was looking for a shortcut to the lake between the houses. It's just not nice to go prowling around people's houses in the middle of the night, right? I mean, I don't.
Plus, come on. Have a better reason than I'm looking for a house for my mother-in-law in the middle of the night. Come on.
Yeah. Police brought in the victims to see if they could identify their assailant from a lineup. 3 of the women picked Jeff, even though they only had the memory of his eyes to go on.
Did they make the people in the lineup put on a mask? Because that would be, and then I'd want to see their eyes close up. Because, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, 2 were also able to identify him by his walk or his gait. Then they did a voice lineup where several men, including Jeff, read from a taped script. And not only did the women pick Jeff Pelo, but one of the women actually curled up into the fetal position and began shaking. And she clung to the interrogation room wall and said, "Yes, that's him." The PTSD, it would be, you'd never get over.
Even to have the guts to be sitting at home and you get that phone call and they say, "Can you come in and do this?" And then, oh boy, relive all that.
Detectives found that Pelo's police computer had been used to run license plate searches on 3 of the victims. In the case of one of the victims, his computer was used to search for personal information on her 3 different times. Pelo claimed that someone else must have been using his computer terminal and possibly used his logon information. Incidentally, the officer that Janelle filed the police report with, which she claimed to have had the stalker, that was none other than Sergeant Pelo himself. Now, the police caught a lucky break when a search of Pelo's home turned up a jacket and a ski mask made of fibers that matched the kind of fibers found in the duct tape used to bind Christie. In a case that was going to be largely based on circumstantial evidence, it was some of the only physical evidence that the police were going to get. One of the victims said that her attacker had a sweatshirt with, England on it, right?
Like
the word England? Oh. No, he and his family went to England and he got the sweatshirt, right? And sure enough, there was a family picture of him wearing an identical sweatshirt with the word England on it. So that was another circumstantial evidence, right?
Oh, yeah.
And even though Ricky Lee argued that a jacket and ski mask could be found in hundreds of people's homes, none of those other hypothetical people were police officers whose computer were used to search for personal information of the 3 victims, right?
Wow.
Kind of a weird coincidence. Investigators recovered information from Jeff's computer, including pornography that showed, quote, Pelo's intent, modus operandi, the existence of a common scheme, plan, or design, or a continued narrative. In other words, much of the pornography was very specific, and a direct correlation can be made between what he viewed in that pornography and what he did or made the victims do during the assault. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I'm not going to go in to describe what was done because that doesn't need to be made.
The things that he made his victims do correlated with the pornography,
that was on his computer. Yeah. Correct. Right. And Ricky Lee would later testify that she knew about some of the pornography because she had walked in on Jeff while he was watching it. Which pornography is not the problem.
Well, there's a lot of issues going on with that person. Let's just leave it at that.
However, Ricky Lee and the rest of Sergeant Pelo's family stood by him. They didn't believe he did it. They couldn't believe.
It would be hard to really, if your loved one, the person that you've known for so long. But sometimes, if,
a spade's a spade, right?
Well, it's just like there's only so many coincidences that happen. Then you have to go, well, listen,
Yep. So the case went to trial, and it can be argued that none of the evidence was as damaging to Pelo as the statements of his victims. Sarah testified that during her assault, she told Pelo that she had just recently discovered she was pregnant. Mm-hmm. She lost the baby and is convinced it was a direct result from Pelo's actions that night.
Stress, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
She had told Pelo that she had just found out she was pregnant, and he asked her to prove it. So she showed him the pregnancy test that she still had.
Prove it? What?
And then he asked her if her fiance knew that she was pregnant and if they were excited about the baby.
Oh, he just wanted to get in on the family?
Yeah, and he wanted also to know how the fiance would feel if he knew that she was pregnant when he raped her.
Oh,
he also asked her if she would keep the baby. Yeah. Also asked her if he would keep the baby in the light of what the attack, right? And asked how upset her parents would be about all this.
What?
And Sarah said, quote, he was elated like a kid at Christmas, overjoyed that all these other people were going to be violated as well.
Yeah, those are his other victims by default. And he loved that. That's why he wanted to know.
Effect.
Yep, he wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, he's
sick bastard.
Messed up.
Christy has since been diagnosed with PTSD and has difficulty sleeping. The mother of Pelo's first victim, who has also been publicly identified only as AM, like we said that her daughter turned to drugs to cope with her assault. She has 2 drug-related felony charges on her record now and can't get a job. Jonelle recounted how Sergeant Pelo was stopped at least twice outside her house before his arrest on June 2006, and in total mockery of the badge he wore, he even attended a community meeting wherein residents vocalized concern over unsolved crimes. Jonelle called Pelo's sexual assaults, quote, a murder of the soul. The fact that no direct DNA links Pelo to these crimes was a source of hope for Pelo's family and frustration. His family felt that he would obviously be found innocent since there was no DNA evidence. That's why you think he made them take baths. Mm-hmm. But that was not to be the case. In June of 2008, Sergeant Jeff Pelo, a 17-year veteran of the Bloomington-Normal Police Department, was found guilty and sentenced to, are you ready?
Oh, I'm not sure.
440 years in prison.
Okay.
There were originally 35 counts against Pelo, but some of the charges were combined to follow Illinois law. 440 years. Can you believe that? It's amazing. More people need that kind of sentencing.
I can't believe he didn't kill anybody. I gotta be honest.
I think he was on his way to escalating.
Yes,
Ricky Lee and her children had to be escorted from the courtroom as they sobbed and cried out against the judge. Ricky Lee was screaming, he didn't do it, and they've got the wrong man. And she was beside herself. And on that day, Ricky Lee lost everything. Years later, she said, quote, I felt like I died. It was the end of my life. And in a lot of ways, it was. I mean, she lost her savings and her retirement. Her credit cards were maxed out and she had to sell the house. But more than anything, she was betrayed by the person she trusted the most, as was all of the community, right? Mm. He was a police officer, a sergeant, policeman of the year. She had been a loving and devoted wife to a man who not only didn't deserve it, but who had lied to her, cheated on her, and robbed her of her security and self-worth. And if a man she loved and believed would be capable of something like that, then who else can she trust now, right?
Yeah. Thinking that you're just a bad judge of character, that what my fault, what did I do? Why didn't I notice that?
A loved one of Pelo's victims said that he didn't just rape 4 women, and in a way, he had raped everybody who knew them as well, like we had talked about earlier. Pelo stripped his fellow police officers of pride, and he stripped women of their dignity.
Yeah, I was thinking about his police guys, the group of guys that he works with, or group of people that he works with. And then, I mean, that would be, I would say it would be a shock no matter what. But the fact that their livelihood was being a police officer, that's just,
More devastation for the family. His son, Keegan, who had turned to drugs to deal with anxiety, he died of an accidental overdose in 2017. just 23 years old at the time. Keegan had snorted heroin laced with carfentanil. Carfentanil is a fentanyl analog, and it's one of the most toxic opioids known. Studies show that it is 10,000 times more toxic than morphine, 4,000 more times toxic than heroin, and 100 times more toxic than fentanyl. And it's responsible for many of the overdose outbreaks in the U.S. The substance is so powerful that even the teeny tiniest of amounts can be deadly. Keegan was unaware that the heroin was laced at the time.
Does he realize that Keegan was his victim too then? I mean, look at how many people
his family's his victim. Ugh. Yeah. And unfortunately, Ricky Lee was the one to find her son's body. And she said it appeared as though he'd just stood from the table and fallen over. They also found a list that Keegan had made of things for him to do that week. So authorities ruled out suicide. For several years, Ricky Lee said that she just stopped trying to make sense of it, and so she finally asked Jeff for a divorce, but he refused to sign the papers. Finally, she just stopped visiting him, and even though she would send him updates on the kids' lives, she just wouldn't see him herself. In 2011, she finally got to divorce Jeff, and she now says that she believes he's guilty. In 2010, Jeff Pelo appealed his sentence, claiming it needed to be thrown out because jurors were shown too much of the pornography from Pelo's computer. The appeals court ruled that a few of the images weren't relevant, but the issue shouldn't affect Pelo's conviction. But it did rule that penalties added into sexual assault counts were unconstitutional. So Pelo's sentence was reduced by 65 years. So now he's only at a measly 375 years. So while we can say that Jeff may not have committed murder, he definitely ravaged and destroyed lives and stands as a cautionary tale against the abuse of power. The women's description of how expertly Pelo went about his acts of depravity, leads one to wonder if there could have been more victims.
I'm sure there is.
Could there be more victims out there who were so broken by his assault that he never came forward?
Embarrassed, hurt.
Right. And it also raises the question of whether this monster had always been inside Jeff or whether his desire to control and humiliate women was just something that came out later in his life. And it's a question Ricky Lee has probably asked herself 1,000 times. How could I not known he was capable of all this?
Because he was a liar. That's what they do. He was a rapist. He was a terrible person. That's what they do.
It's just so hard to think that, he went from policeman of the year to a convicted serial rapist.
You know what? By all accounts, he probably was a really good policeman, maybe, But that is...
So then what happened, right?
No, that just... I'm sure in his head, I'm sure his being a policeman got him avenues and information which normal people couldn't get. There's a lady that I'm going to run her driver's license, which, we can't do that, but he can. Right. So then, there's where she lives. You know what I'm saying? So
was he just sitting there one day all...
No, there were probably signs.
And then something happened.
Yeah,
and he's like, she's cute. I wonder what she's doing. And so he just runs her plate and then he follows her home.
I bet you if you look back...
start that innocently, or did it... What happened?
No, I bet if you look back, there were signs, maybe like people that he dated and he date raped them, and the poor person didn't realize it was rape or thought, as often is the case, victim, it's my fault, right? So I'm sure there were some signs there, but maybe not.
Well, even maybe the first victim that we know, he had it all planned out. He sat and thought about it for a long time. You know how, sometimes you just don't do it he didn't just do it on a whim. Some people are just overcome, I guess, to rape people. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
But also in his line of work, he probably had access to a lot of that as well, in the minds of, rapists, seeing how rapists failed, seeing how some had succeeded. He might have taken all that information and then applied it.
So it was all premeditated. He had to say, I want to do this. And how do I do this? So he might have been thinking of it for quite a while.
Yeah. And I think
before he actually went to
stalking them was that's for those kind of people, that's just as thrilling sometimes as the crime. And then finding them and finding out about them and knowing enough to threaten them with
But you would think, being a police officer, he would know that they had I don't know. Why didn't he confess? Was he too much of a narcissist to say?
Because he thought he could get away with it. Because they really didn't have that much.
They didn't. They just had witnesses. They had the fibers. But no DNA, man.
Yep.
I don't know. And they had him trying to buy a house at 1 a.m. in the subdivision or the street where no houses were for sale.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's pretty scary.
Well, and that's
especially
why that is so
coming
scary.
that it's a police officer,
exactly,
right?
That it is that sort of person of authority. That's the one you would run to if something like that happened. And then it is him.
Right.
Mm-mm-mm.
Total abuse of power.
And
scary. That whole
sorry, go ahead.
That whole waking up with a flashlight in your face.
Oh, yeah.
I've lived that firsthand. A couple weeks ago, my daughter woke me up by doing that. And I swear to God, I left my body. My soul left my body.
Yeah.
It was the scariest thing ever. And
normal.
even though she shined the light on my face and said, Mom, I still jumped out of my skin.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine. Right. I couldn't imagine waking up to that and be somebody that I don't know. Which, by the way, my daughter got in big trouble for doing that, by the way.
Well, Mike, she's old enough to know better
she's
than that.
Old enough to know.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's happens more than we think, I believe.
But seriously, what a great sentence. I mean,
you did it, buddy.
Like your episode last week where the guy only got 2 years, which seems he should have gotten a little bit longer. There's a lot of sentences that
they don't match
this.
Like they don't match the crime. I know.
And granted, I'm happy that he received that. It does seem a little bit too much considering that he'll never serve the whole time. But that means he just doesn't get parole.
Yeah. I wonder how he's treated in prison because, the prisoners, they don't really like themselves, some police officers.
Officers? Yeah. I don't know. I don't really care. Why don't you ride him?
Why don't you ride him and let us know,
No,
Jen?
I have a lot of time that is filled that I don't need to do. Writing that kind of stuff.
Creep. See you later.
He is. It's just forget about him. He's disgusting.
That's something.
But that's Jeff Pelo, somebody that you would think should protect you.
That's terrible.
Totally did the opposite. So, but thank you, EJ, for suggesting this. It was heart-wrenching and quite a gut punch, to be honest.
I don't know.
Because you just don't want to think that police are capable of doing that, but we've seen it time and again.
But they're people.
It does.
I know.
But anyway, do check out EJ's book, Ted Bundy, Memories of the Beast. You can find it on Amazon.
Do we got any promos this week? I believe we do.
Our promo this week is from our friends at Crime Diner, Dana, Nidia, and Cindy. They've got a cute type podcast. They have a theme, and then they have one of them, I forget which one, makes food according to that theme. And then they have like a dinner party.
Dinner combo.
And they sit and they discuss cases and with food to match. It's really, really cute. They do a great job, and I think you will really like them. They are part of the Dark Cast Network, which is run by our friend CJ from Beyond the Rainbow. So
check them out. Check them out.
You'll like it. Make sure you listen to their podcast. They're sweet women.
I will.
Ladies, I think you'll like them.
All right.
Lots. But that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Until next time, remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.
Ooh, I've been dying to try this place.
Oh my god, me too. I've heard such good things about it.
Welcome to the Crime Diner. I'm Cindy. I'll be cooking for you this evening. Here are your menus.
Oh, what are you thinking about getting?
I don't know, murder with a side of cannibalism? What about you?
Ooh, that sounds good. I'm torn between historical mayhem and the social injustice, maybe?
Oh.
I just want to let you know that each episode comes with dinner, dessert, and a specialty drink chosen by yours truly.
Wine Dine and Storytime has had a makeover, and we invite you to slide into the booth with us at the Crime Diner, where each week we will discuss a crime over dinner, drinks, and dessert. See you there!